I thought my husband was cheating, but the truth was worse. For weeks, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. It started with little things: missed calls, late nights at work, the way my husband, Daniel, would turn his phone screen away when I walked into the room. At first, I ignored it. We'd been married for 7 years, and I trusted him. But doubt is a funny thing. Once it creeps in, it spreads like a virus. One night, when Daniel said he had to stay late at the office again, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. His car didn't go to his office. Instead, he pulled into a quiet suburban neighborhood I didn't recognize. My heart pounded as I parked a few houses down, watching him from a safe distance. He got out, walked up to a charming 2-story home, and knocked. The door opened, and a woman greeted him with a warm smile. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Who was she? The answer seemed obvious. An affair. My stomach churned as I imagined all the lies he must have told me. I was ready to storm up to the house, but I hesitated. Instead, I took out my phone and started recording. If I was going to confront him, I wanted proof. But just as I zoomed in, something strange happened. A child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, came running to the door. The boy threw his arms around Daniel's legs, and Daniel hugged him back. My mind reeled. A woman? A child? Was this his secret family? I felt sick, but I needed answers. I waited until Daniel left, then walked up to the house, my legs shaking. The woman looked startled when she opened the door. I'm sorry to bother you, I stammered, trying to steady my voice. But I need to know. Who is Daniel to you? Her face changed instantly, pity and something else. Please come in, she said softly. I hesitated but stepped inside. The boy was playing with toy cars on the floor, completely unaware of the tension in the room. Daniel's your husband, isn't he? The woman asked. I nodded. She exhaled sharply, closing her eyes for a moment. Then she gestured toward the child. This is Liam. He's Daniel's son. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. That's impossible, I whispered. We don't have kids. She gave me a sad smile. Not with you. Tears welled in my eyes. How long? She hesitated. 7 years. My heart stopped. 7 years. As long as we'd been married. My mind raced through memories, searching for clues. Had he ever slipped? Had I missed something obvious? I had suspected infidelity, but I never imagined this. A double life. A child. I never wanted to hurt you, the woman said, but I couldn't keep this a secret anymore. I turned to look at Liam, oblivious to the weight of the conversation happening around him. He loves him, the woman continued. He never wanted to abandon him. A fresh wave of betrayal crashed over me. He had spent 7 years lying to me, building a life with me, while also being a father to a child I never knew existed. I had come here expecting the worst. But the truth was so much worse than I could have imagined. I stood there, staring at the child. Liam. Trying to make sense of what I had just heard. My husband had a secret son. A whole other life. And I had been blind to it for 7 years. My knees felt weak, so I sat down on the couch, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The woman, Liam's mother, watched me carefully. How did this happen? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She sighed and sat across from me. Daniel and I dated before he met you. We were young and things got complicated. I found out I was pregnant right after we broke up. He didn't know at first. I was scared, and by the time I told him, he was already with you. My stomach twisted. So, what? He decided to live 2 lives? She shook her head. Number, he wanted to do the right thing. He didn't want to leave you, but he also didn't want to abandon his son. So, he made a choice. To be there for Liam in secret. I covered my mouth, feeling bile rise in my throat. All those nights he said he was working late. He was here? Yes. My heart pounded. This wasn't just an affair. This was years of deception, a carefully maintained double life. And now that I knew the truth, I couldn't unknow it. I stood up suddenly, needing air. I have to go. The woman nodded as if she understood. I'm sorry you found out this way, but Liam is innocent in all of this. I swallowed the lump in my throat and glanced at the boy one last time. He had Daniel's eyes. I walked out, feeling the cold night air hit me like a slap. My hands trembled as I got into my car. I couldn't go home. Home wasn't real anymore. Instead, I drove to a quiet parking lot and let the tears fall. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, something else simmered. Anger. Not just at Daniel, but at myself. For trusting him. For never questioning his lies. For letting love blind me. I wiped my face and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. He answered after a few rings, his voice casual, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Hey, babe, I just finished at the office. On my way home now. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Don't bother, I said coldly. I know everything. A long silence, then a quiet, what? I know about Liam. I know about her. His sharp inhale was all the confirmation I needed. Come home, Daniel, I said, my voice steady despite the fire raging inside me. We need to talk. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was ready to face it. I sat in the dark parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded as I waited for Daniel to respond. Babe, he finally said, his voice shaky. Please, just let me explain. I closed my eyes, breathing through the wave of anger and betrayal threatening to consume me. Explain? I hissed. Explain what, Daniel? That you've been living a double life? That you've been lying to me for 7 years? Silence. Come home, I repeated. Now. I hung up before he could say another word. When Daniel walked through the door 30 minutes later, he looked like a man walking to his execution. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by guilt and fear. I stood in the living room, arms crossed, the weight of his lies pressing down on me like an anchor. Sit, I ordered. He obeyed without a word. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Tell me everything. No more lies. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. He started. I swear to you, I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, congratulations. You failed. He flinched. Before I met you, I was with Emily. It was serious, but we broke up. A few months later, she told me she was pregnant. By then, I had already met you, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose you, but I couldn't abandon my child. I stared at him, my mind spinning. So, instead of telling me the truth, you built an entire lie? I thought I was protecting you, he said, eyes pleading. And protecting Liam. I wanted to be in his life, but I was afraid of losing you. I shook my head, disgusted. You did lose me, Daniel. The second you chose deception over honesty. Tears welled in his eyes. I love you. That's never changed. I scoffed. You don't lie to someone you love for 7 years. You don't sneak around pretending to be a devoted husband while keeping a secret family on the side. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I was scared. Of what? I demanded. He looked up, his expression raw. Of losing everything. Of losing you. I felt my resolve waver for a split second. Then I remembered the woman, the child, the years of deception. Daniel, I said, my voice deadly calm. Do you love her? His breath hitched. Number, it was never about that. I love Liam, but Emily and we were over before he was even born. I believed him, but it didn't change what he had done. I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the table between us. His eyes widened in panic. "No, please," he whispered. "We can fix this." I shook my head, my chest tight. Some things can't be fixed. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "You broke us, Daniel. I can't live with this. I won't." Tears streamed down his face, but I felt nothing but emptiness. I stood up and walked toward the bedroom, grabbing a bag. I needed space. I needed to breathe. As I stepped out the door, I turned back one last time. "I hope you're a good father to Liam," I said quietly, "because you'll never be my husband again." And with that, I left. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring through my tears. My mind replayed every moment of my marriage, dissecting it, searching for the signs I had missed. Every late night at work, every weekend trip he had taken alone, every time he had reassured me with a kiss and a smile. I had believed it all. And now? Now I was nothing more than the wife he had deceived. The wife who had unknowingly played second place in his carefully orchestrated life. I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, needing space, silence, and distance from the man I no longer recognized. I curled up in the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what my life would look like tomorrow. Would I file for divorce immediately? Would he fight for me? Did I even want him to? I had no answers, only exhaustion, only... I woke up feeling hollow. The weight of my shattered marriage pressed on my chest as I checked my phone. 10 missed calls from Daniel. 5 unread texts. Daniel, please come home, we need to talk. Daniel, I know you're angry, but I love you. Please don't do this. Daniel, I'm sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. Daniel, just tell me where you are. I'm scared I've lost you forever. Daniel, please, I need you. I threw the phone onto the bed and covered my face. He was scared? Good. Maybe now he understood even a fraction of what I was feeling. A soft knock at the door made me sit up. My stomach clenched. Had he found me? I hesitated before opening it, but it wasn't Daniel. It was Emily. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. She looked tired, her blonde hair pulled into a loose bun, dark circles under her eyes. I hope I'm not overstepping, she said cautiously. I thought you might need someone to talk to. Of all the people I expected to see, she was last on the list. I don't know what to say to you, I admitted. She nodded. That's fair. Can I come in? I almost said no. Almost slammed the door in her face, but some part of me, maybe the part that needed closure, stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the edge of the chair near the window, folding her hands in her lap. I know you probably hate me, she started. I exhaled sharply. I don't even know how to feel about you. I don't think this is your fault, but you knew about me, and you let this happen. She looked down at her hands. I did. That stung more than I expected. I was selfish, she admitted. I let Daniel keep his secret because I was afraid that if you found out, he'd choose you and leave Liam behind. And I couldn't let that happen. Her voice broke slightly, and for the first time, I saw her as something other than the woman my husband had betrayed me with. She was a mother protecting her child. But I was still a wife who had been left in the dark. I don't know if I can ever forgive him, I whispered. Emily met my gaze. I don't think you should. That caught me off guard. What? She sighed. I know Daniel. He's not a bad man, but he's a coward. He wanted everything, his marriage, his child, his secrets. But life doesn't work that way. He didn't just lie to you, he lied to me too. He made me believe this was okay, that it was necessary. I swallowed hard. And now? She shook her head. Now I realize we both deserve better. A bitter laugh escaped me. Funny, I spent last night wondering if I was the other woman in my own marriage. Emily smiled sadly. You weren't. But neither was I. The real other woman was the truth he tried to bury. I let that sink in. After a long silence, she stood up. I don't know what you're going to do next, but whatever it is, don't let him manipulate you. He'll beg, he'll promise, he'll say all the right things. I nodded, my throat tight. Thank you for coming. She hesitated at the door. Liam is a good kid. I just hope one day this mess won't be something he has to carry. And then she was gone. I didn't go home right away. I needed time. But eventually I returned, prepared to face Daniel one last time. When I walked in, he looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his face unshaven, his hair a mess. Thank God, he breathed, stepping toward me. I was so scared you wouldn't come back. I held up a hand. Don't, just sit. He did. His hands were shaking. I spoke to Emily, I said, watching his reaction. His face paled. No, I cut him off. You don't get to talk until I'm finished. He swallowed hard. I'm leaving you, Daniel. A sob escaped him. Please, I love you, No, I said firmly. You don't love me. You loved the life you built with me. You loved the lie you lived in. But love and deception can't exist together. Tears spilled down his cheeks. I was trying to protect you. I stared at him. You were protecting yourself. He had no response to that. I picked up my bag, the same one I had packed the night before. I'm filing for divorce, I said, voice steady. I hope you step up for Liam. He deserves a father who isn't a liar. He broke then, sobbing into his hands. I felt nothing. I walked to the door and placed my wedding ring on the table one final time. Goodbye, Daniel. And with that, I walked away, free from the chains of his lies, finally ready to start a new chapter on my own terms. I walked out of that house and out of Daniel's life. But the truth? The pain didn't disappear just because I left. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and sleepless nights. I moved into a small apartment across town, filling the silence with music, books, and anything to keep my mind from replaying the last 7 years of my life like a bad movie. Daniel called. He texted. He even showed up outside my building once, begging me to talk. I ignored him. I had nothing left to say. But despite everything, there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Liam. That little boy had no idea his father's lies had shattered my world. No idea that his very existence had been a secret I wasn't meant to discover. And as much as I wanted to move on, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was a part of this too. An innocent piece of the wreckage Daniel had left behind. One evening, I was grabbing coffee at a small cafe near my new place when I saw her. Emily. She was sitting by the window, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. She looked exhausted. I hesitated for a moment before walking over. She glanced up, surprised. Hey. Hey, I said awkwardly. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I wasn't sure why I had approached her. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I just needed to feel like I wasn't alone in this mess. Mind if I sit? I finally asked. She gestured to the seat across from her. Go ahead. I ordered a coffee, and for a while we just sat there, two women linked by a man who had lied to us both. How's Liam? I finally asked. A small smile tugged at her lips. He's good. Happy. He doesn't know anything has changed, not yet. She paused, then sighed. But I know it's only a matter of time before he starts asking questions. I nodded, staring down at my cup. And Daniel? Emily scoffed. Trying. He says he wants to be a better father, but I don't know if I believe him. I understood that feeling all too well. Then, out of nowhere, she asked something that caught me off guard. Do you want to meet him? I looked up, confused. What? Liam, she said. I know it's weird, but you were part of his father's life for 7 years. I don't want him to grow up with secrets, and I don't want him to think the only thing he got from Daniel was lies. I didn't know what to say. Meeting Liam meant stepping into something I wasn't sure I was ready for. It meant facing the child who had unknowingly been at the center of my heartbreak. But it also meant rewriting the narrative Daniel had tried so hard to control. And maybe, just maybe, it meant finally moving forward. I exhaled slowly, then met Emily's gaze. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." And just like that, the next chapter of my story began, one I never could have seen coming. The day I met Liam felt heavier than I expected. Emily and I had arranged to meet at a small park near her house. She had told Liam a friend was coming to meet him. She didn't want to overwhelm him with explanations yet. I appreciated that. I wasn't even sure how I felt about this, let alone how a 7-year-old would process it. When I arrived, I saw them sitting on a picnic blanket under a tree. Emily waved me over while Liam focused on his juice box, swinging his little legs as he sipped. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to walk toward them. "Liam," Emily said gently, "this is Sarah." He looked up at me, his bright green eyes, Daniel's eyes, studying me with curiosity. "Hi," he said simply. "Hey, Liam," I said, managing a small smile. Emily patted the space next to her, so I sat down. My heart pounded, but Liam seemed unfazed, returning his attention to the toy truck in his hands. For a few minutes, I just watched him play, unsure how to engage. But then he pushed the truck toward me. "Do you want to play?" he asked. I blinked. Sure." I picked up the truck and rolled it back to him. He grinned and made engine noises, dramatically flipping it over as if it had crashed. And just like that, the tension eased. Emily watched us with a quiet smile, as if she had expected this all along. After about an hour, Liam ran off to the playground, leaving me and Emily alone. I wasn't sure how today would go, I admitted, watching him climb the monkey bars. Emily exhaled. "Me neither." She paused, then looked at me. I meant what I said before. I don't want secrets in Liam's life. And I don't want him to grow up thinking the only thing his father ever did was lie. I hesitated before asking the question that had been weighing on me. "Do you think Daniel can really change?" Emily sighed. "I don't know. But I do know this. We don't have to wait for him to." I turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" She smiled softly. "Liam might not understand everything now, but one day he will. And when that day comes, I want him to know that even though his father failed us, we didn't fail him." I felt something shift inside me. For so long, my pain had been tied to Daniel, to his betrayal, his choices, his lies. But sitting here, watching Liam play, I realized something. I had the power to define what came next. Daniel might have been the reason my life fell apart, but he wasn't going to be the reason I stayed broken. Over the next few months, I slowly rebuilt my life. The divorce was finalized, and I never looked back. Daniel tried to fix things, tried to make amends, but I had made my decision. I wasn't his wife anymore. But something unexpected happened. Liam became part of my life. Not because of Daniel, but because of Emily. We formed an unlikely bond. Two women who had every reason to hate each other, but instead chose something different. We chose to rise above the wreckage. I wasn't Liam's mother. I never would be. But in some small way, I became part of his world, and he became part of mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living. Months passed, and the weight of my failed marriage slowly lifted. I found a new rhythm. Work, therapy, late-night talks with Emily, and the occasional park visits with Liam. My life was nothing like I had imagined, but in some strange way, it felt lighter. Daniel, on the other hand, kept trying to wedge his way back in. At first, it was small things. Texts I ignored, voicemails I deleted without listening to. Then he started showing up at my apartment, begging for just 5 minutes of my time. Each time I shut the door in his face. Until one evening, when I found him waiting outside my building, leaning against his car. "I'm not leaving until we talk," he said. I sighed. You really should. Please, Sarah. His voice cracked. Just, just let me explain. A bitter laugh escaped me. You already did, remember? When you told me about Liam? When you admitted you'd been lying to me for 7 years? He flinched but didn't back down. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I just need you to hear me out. I crossed my arms. You have 2 minutes. He exhaled and ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I've been in therapy. I arched an eyebrow. And it's made me realize a lot of things, he continued, about my choices, my fears, the way I handled everything with you, with Emily, with Liam. I stared at him, unimpressed. Therapy doesn't erase what you did, Daniel. I know. His voice was desperate now. But I don't want to be that man anymore. I want to be better, for Liam, for myself, and I just wanted you to know that. I studied him for a long moment. He looked different. Not just tired, but worn down, like a man who had finally begun to understand the depth of his mistakes. But it didn't change the fact that it was too late. I hope you do change, I said finally. Liam deserves a father he can trust, but I deserve a life without you in it. Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. I get it. Good, I said, turning toward the entrance of my building. But before I stepped inside, I glanced back. Goodbye, Daniel. And this time, I meant it. 1 year later. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting at a coffee shop with my ex-husband's ex-girlfriend, laughing over pastries while a 7-year-old tried, and failed, to balance a spoon on his nose, I would have called you insane. But here I was. Liam had just finished telling a ridiculous story about a monster he swore he saw in his backyard, and Emily and I were barely holding back our laughter. You know, I think you should write that down, I teased. Maybe you'll be the next big horror author. Liam grinned. Really? Definitely, Emily said, ruffling his hair. It was easy, natural, a far cry from the shattered woman I had been when I first learned the truth. Daniel still saw Liam, though on a more structured schedule. He was trying, really trying, to be a better father. And while I would never take him back, I had finally found it in me to let go of the resentment. I had a new life now. A different one than I expected, but a good one. And for the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward, and it felt damn good.